Morgan, and today I am excited to talk about my thoughts on the new Barbie movie. And a couple things before we start. First of all, there will be spoilers, and second of all, I am very passionate about this subject, so it might be a little bit of a long video. I finally watched it with my significant other, since it is now available to, I think it's rent on, if I remember right, it's like the Google Play Store / like YouTube and Amazon. I don't think it's on HBO Max yet. For some reason, I'm thinking it's not on there yet. But I was waiting to watch it until it became available to like actually watch at home. And part of the reason for that is that movie theaters aren't always accessible for all of us with various different disabilities and medical conditions and stuff. And while there are some movie theaters who do wonderful things like trying to do sensory-friendly showings of movies, these aren't always widespread. Like, there aren't always a lot of these available. And so I did end up waiting until the movie was available to, you know, like, watch at home. And so that is why it is, like, a little bit late that I'm doing this video compared to when many other people might have seen the movie. So I have been waiting to see this movie for quite a while now, and I was very excited to see it. And overall, I would say in a lot of ways it exceeded my expectations, but there are other ways that I was like, okay, this was not quite what I was expecting. First of all, I want to talk about some of the things that I absolutely adored, which would be the set design. Just, the set design was amazing. Like, just absolutely beautiful. Like, I loved the life-size Barbie play sets and stuff. When I was little, I remember I had, there was this big castle, like Barbie dollhouse that I played with. I think it might have been from I think it might have been based off of the castle in the Swan Lake movie, that I remember having like a toy Barbie like dollhouse that I would play with, and like the designs, it was just so reminiscent of actual like Barbie toy like dollhouses, and I loved it. And I loved, oh my gosh, there were references to some of the toys that I actually had as a kid in the movie, like what was it, like Pregnant Skipper or whatever it was, I can't remember her name, but the one with the auburn hair who wears the purple dress, like I had that doll. And then there was this weird Barbie had this like toy dog that you would feed it and it would like poop on, like when it wagged its tail or something. I think I had that as part of like some vet play set. Like that brought back like memories of like, wait, I think I know what this is based off of, and I think I had that toy. But I loved all the references to like the actual like Barbie dolls and toys, because as someone who played with Barbies as a kid and whose mom also played with Barbies when she was a kid, it's like these are things that like I think speak a lot to like the intergenerational, just the way that so often like Barbie playing with dolls is something that that multiple people in a family will have done. It's something that like children and adults can relate to each other on. And like I also loved the in the real world, when Barbie goes to the real world, there is this mother who, like, she still loves the doll that she played with her daughter when her daughter was little, because they formed fond memories. Like, they bonded over this toy, and I think that's just so sweet, and I think that's something that a lot of women relate to, because the Barbie dolls are like toys that, for me at least, like my mom also remembered playing with those, and so they're a beautiful, like, they're a way that people bond with each other, which I think is just, it's beautiful. It's something that young girls, I think, like, it's beautiful. It's just beautiful that so often young girls started off playing with Barbie dolls, but then they pass that tradition on to their own kids. Like, that's something that's absolutely beautiful. Yeah. And I also love how Barbie, like, they point out that, like, yeah, Barbie's something that is empowering, because I remember when I was little, like, we had the veterinarian Barbie playset and stuff. Like, Barbie, I think, was definitely really important for teaching girls, at least in my generation, that like, yes, you can be like traditionally beautiful into things like clothing and fashion, but you can still be who you want to be. Like, I remember playing Barbie Explorer on the computer when I was quite young, and it's like, hey, Barbie, it shows that Barbie can be a journalist, and Barbie can also go out there, explore the world, and do things for like the greater human knowledge, helping to teach him, like helping to, I guess, like preserve history, to like do like archaeological things for like to help expand human knowledge, help preserve history. And she can do that while still wearing fashionable clothes. And like, I think it's really cool that it's like Barbie shows that women can be like who we want to be and still be feminine. And I've always loved that, absolutely loved that about Barbie. So yeah, Barbie is very like, I love it. But I also, that also is leading me to say, I think that there were some things about the writing in the movie that I really didn't like. While like I get that Barbie Land, it's like this beautiful, wonderful utopia for the Barbies, but by the end of the movie, I was realizing that like for the Kens, it feels like they're like second-class citizens, which is something that was like really, it bothered me a lot, that like in this beautiful feminist utopia, the men weren't being treated like they weren't being treated as equals. It was not an egalitarian society. It was like a matriarchy. And it's like, that's a problem. That's a major problem, because it made me so freaking sad when it's like, when Ken was like in the real world and he was just so excited that someone asked him like what the time was. Like, people were actually like treated him as if he was like equal. And it's like, that made me realize that like he was not treated very well in Barbie Land. And that just made me so freaking sad, because it's like, poor Ken. Like, he deserves to be seen as someone who is worthwhile, even if he isn't like as skilled at most things as a lot of the other people in the Barbie world. It's like he's still a worthwhile, like a worthwhile, I don't know if I want to say human being, because technically, like, aren't they all made of plastic? But he's still a worthwhile character. And so it's like, it made me feel really sad that it's like it felt like he wasn't being treated as an equal like person in his society, and that just made me feel freaking sad. And then when he brings like the patriarchy back to Barbie Land, it's like, It just kind of reminds me of when people try and fight like sexism with reverse sexism, or like when people try and fight past discrimination with more discrimination in the present. It's like, I don't think that he I don't think he was necessarily trying to be like some awful oppressor. I think he was just trying to make things right in the only way that he had an idea as to how, which sucks. And I also thought that having like the Kens fighting with each other, I think it really shows a lot about like, because, okay, in real life, I feel like oftentimes, like me as a woman, that sometimes like us women are expected to like tear each other down. Like, sometimes we end up tearing each other down instead of building each other up. And I think that's a major problem in like society in real life, is that sometimes women don't always support each other. And I think that having the Kens like being infighting with each other shows that like, yeah, this is actually a problem that happens. It's just that when it's happening to Kens, it's kind of like in a fictional way, so we can pick out that like, hey, this is something that I relate to, without it being like, hey, this is calling me out. But I do feel like a major issue with like society in general is when people who should be having the same common goals and stuff end up just infighting or like tearing each other down instead of building each other up. And I think that having Kens do that, like having that be one of the things that like hurts their ability to progress, I think that's sadly true of the real world, because so often I do feel like there are situations where women, like, we don't always support each other, and so I think it was cool to see like a parallel of that in fiction. And one thing that I really love about this movie is the I Am Kenough song, or Like, I Am Enough by Ken, like, that was just so beautiful and inspiring, and I think everyone, like, regardless of gender identity, needs to hear that message of, like, hey, you are enough without society's approval, with, like, you don't have to have, like, a significant other to be a worthwhile human being. You are enough. And I think that's just so beautiful, such a beautiful message that people of all gender identities need to hear, that you are enough. You are enough. You are a valuable, worthwhile human being just for being you. Like, and I just thought that song was beautiful. But yeah, oh my gosh, yeah, like, Ken was a sweetie. Like, he was a sweetie kid. He had a big heart. I felt like he didn't necessarily have the best ability to think through his actions, where they would lead, but I still think his heart was in the right place. And I don't know how I really feel about, like, the romance aspect of the movie. It felt like it felt sad that Ken constantly was seeking validation through romance. And I do think it's important that he realizes by the end that, like, hey, he can't depend on Barbie. Like, he cannot be self-fulfilled through Barbie. He has to be, like, he has to have the ability to grow, to like, to be happy for himself. He can't just rely on Barbie for his happiness. And so I do think that having Barbie go to the real world at the end, like, that is important for Ken's growth. And I don't know, it's just, like, I felt like Ken was a more likable character than Barbie, like, a slightly more relatable character. Like, I just felt like, as a woman, the struggles that Ken went throughout that movie, a lot of them, it's like, these are relatable to the struggles that women go through in real life. And it's like, yes, finally representation. It's just a little bit weird that it's like, hey, Ken is our representation rather than Barbie. There was another thing that I wanted to complain about. When Barbie, at the end of the movie, she goes to the real world, like, towards the very, very end of the movie. So if someone might have, like, left early to go to the bathroom or something, then they might have missed this. But when Barbie goes to the real world at the end of the movie, deciding to stay there and be human, there's this, like, she's waiting in the car with the mom, the like, teenage girl, and then I think the girl's, like, dad or whatever, and she's, like, getting all hyped up, being like, okay, I can do this, and then she goes into somewhere, and I'm like, oh, is this gonna be, like, a job interview? What's she doing? And she's going to see a gynecologist, and that made me so freaking mad, because it shows to me that the writers of this movie, like, why did they think this was okay? They're basically saying that to be okay, I'm not gonna put words into their mouth, but how I perceived it, to me personally, is that they're saying that to be a real woman is to go to the gynecologist. And that pisses me off, because first of all, it is basically saying that to be a woman is just to have, like, certain biological organs or whatever, and it's just like, I am more than that. As a woman, I am more than my biology, and I also think that it's slightly transphobic, because, like, there are some people who might be, like, female, who might identify as women, but who might have different, like, biological components than I do, and that's okay. They're beautiful, worthwhile women too. So I think that having Barbie, like, to be, like, a real human woman, going to the gynecologist, like, it feels like that's that the writers were saying that this is what being a woman is all about. And it's like, to me, that's a terrible, trash message to end on. That's, like, something that I'd expect someone, like, it reminds me, it makes me personally feel like I'm being seen as if, like, my biology is the entirety of what makes me a woman, when it's not. Like, that's not. It's like, being a woman is also, like, someone's gender identity and gender expression and all these other things. Like how I act, how I talk, what I dress in, my posture. Like, there's so much more to being a woman than just, like, my biology. And so that was very, like, frustrating. I hated that ending. I absolutely hated that ending. I think it was a terrible message to leave on women leaving the theater. And I also feel like it's the sort of thing that I'd expect to hear from someone who's, like, transphobic, because sorry, I don't want to segue into that, because I don't think that was really the message that the Barbie writers were trying to send, but that's just how it came off as to me personally. And okay, also another thing that really bothered me about the Barbie movie is when, like when the Kens like forget to go to the polls or whatever, that feels like that reminded me of a Simpsons episode a long time ago. But when the Barbies end up being like, hey, let's restore our previous constitution, yada yada yada, and then one of the Kens is like, hey, can we at least have a Supreme Court justice? And then like the Barbie, was it like President Barbie was like, no, let's start a little smaller. And that just made me realize that like the Kens like have no say in the society. It feels like they're second class citizens. It feels like they have no say in how their government is run, which is really screwed up. And it feels like kind of like the French monarchy being like, hey, let's make things exactly how they were before, and let's just pretend that like none of this ever happened, and like let's just keep oppressing our peasants. That's just how it felt like to me. It just felt so wrong that it's like the Kens didn't even have the fact that would be considered progress for them to have some lower appointment tells me that like there were no Kens in the Barbie world's court system, which is just really screwed up. Like that's horrifying to think that it's like an entire group of people based on their gender identity or whatever has like no say in the government. And it's like, okay, I get that this is something that like in the inverse has happened like really horribly, sadly. Like this sort of thing has happened throughout history, that like women have no representation, but I think that we don't solve that by just oppressing Kens. Like that doesn't make it any better. It's just like, how do I put this? Fighting sexism with reverse sexism doesn't make anything better for anyone. It's like we should be fighting for equality. We should be making sure that both Barbies and Kens have representation in their government, that they're both being treated as equals and worthwhile beings in their world. And I think that's also something we should be striving for in real life, to be treating people like as equals, as all worthwhile humans, and that someone's like gender identity or their like or other like immutable characteristics such as like their race or their sexual orientation or whatever, like none of these things should be used to discriminate against people. We should be treating people as equal regardless of their immutable characteristics. And so I think that like having the Barbie world just go back to being like ruled by Barbies for Barbies is a friggin' problem. I think it's a really terrible ending. It makes me feel really sad. It makes me feel like really, really sad. Like, it makes me feel bad for all those Kens who are oppressed. And I don't like as someone who I would say, like, I would consider myself to be like an egalitarian lipstick feminist, where it's like I believe that we should have like equality and that women deserve rights and that women can be beautiful and want rights. I think that like we don't fight sexism with more sexism. And so it's like I think that like real feminism would be wanting the women to have rights, but also wanting the Kens to have rights as well as the Barbies. Like, I'm just saying that's what real feminism is. It's about not wanting anyone to be oppressed. It's about wanting, like, non-oppression for everyone. Not just, oh, let's make women the oppressors. No, it should be, let's have Barbies have rights and let's have Kens have rights. That is what feminism should be about everyone having rights. So, I don't know, like, the Barbie movie made me, I think it made me think critically about some of the influences in our culture, but it made me so pissed. Like, it made me so mad because it felt like the Kens were just being oppressed. Like, they had no justice by the end of the movie, and it just made me feel really frustrated. Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. That's where I would say, I don't know if that's the message the authors were trying to send across, like the writers, but I don't know, it's like, if this was meant to be like some dystopian, utopian, like, thought puzzle making us think, then I think the writers did a really good job about that. But if they're trying to send this message, like if they're trying to send some other sort of message, I guess is what I'm trying to say, if that wasn't the message they were trying to get across, then it's like, I'm not sure if the authors really accomplished their goal. Like, I don't know, like, if this is meant to be like a dystopian, utopian thing, then I think it was well written. But if not, then I'm like, what was the writer's like actual intent with this movie? So yeah, and honestly, I do think that they could have gotten better writers for this, because I've seen some extremely, extremely good Barbie movies. Like, Barbie is the Princess and the Pauper. Like, that was brilliant. Whoever wrote Preminger as a villain just deserves accolades. Like, Preminger, excellent villain. Whereas, like, in this Barbie movie, like, I felt like the villain seem to be like these greater ideas of like patriarchy and matriarchy and stuff, rather than there being like actual characters who were evil, because it's like the way that the Mattel Corporation was written just seemed a little bit chaotic. Like they were not very strong antagonists, more so like that they're like comedic, oh, like we're gonna be a slight inconvenience, rather than strong antagonists, which makes me think that it's like, hey, the ideas are what's important here, not like, oh, protagonists, antagonists, I don't know. Whereas I feel like there are some Barbie movies that accomplish this sort of thing in a much better manner. Like Barbie is the Princess of the Pauper, like that tackles issues of things like indentured servitude and like the unfortunate economic realities that some people face in real life. Like I think Barbie is the Princess and the Pauper touched on really hard topics, but still did so in a way where it was like really well written, really enjoyable. The animation was not the greatest because it was at that era, animation wasn't always what we expect today. But I loved the storytelling of a movie like that, which tells me that Mattel, like, they can do really well-written movies, but I feel like Barbie, like the new Barbie movie, like the writing just is not as good as some of their older animated classics. Like, again, Barbie's the Princess and the Pauper, I think, like, best Barbie movie, but I also feel like Barbie Swan Lake, Barbie as Barbie and the 12 Dancing Princesses were also good, and, like, Barbie as the Three Musketeers, I think was also pretty good, and was, like, a very, like, kid-friendly way to address things like women not always being treated equally. Like, I think that movie did a good job of addressing that in a way that was accessible for young audiences. But like, I don't know. I feel like the new Barbie movie, like, it just, I don't know, like, I feel like I love the Kens and that they were oppressed. I think it's really screwed up that we're painting, like, this utopia as, like, I don't know, I don't think that Barbie Land is a utopia. I think it's a dystopia, if anything. So yeah, I guess those are my thoughts on this movie, but I love the set design. I love the costuming. I think the actors did a great job, and I don't find Margot Robbie's Barbie to be unsympathetic, but I do think it's, like, what I feel sad about is the fact that it's like they're pushed into specific roles. Like, she felt pushed into a specific role in her life, and now that she's figuring out what she actually wants to be, like, that's good for her. That's good. I'm happy for her that she's pursuing who she wants to be, figuring herself out, etc. Like, that's good, and I felt the acting was good, but I don't know, I have some criticisms about, like, the messages that the movie's sending, whether or not they intended to send it, as well as, like, some criticisms about, like, the writing, like, me trying to understand, like, okay, what was the intent that the writers had with this movie? So yeah, sorry for rambling, and I hope that this does encourage you to see movies that you might be interested in seeing, to consume media that you'd like to learn more about or are curious about, and I hope you have a great day. Bye!